I'm super excited at my guest today, the amazing Anna Mackenzie, who randomly, Anna, we've actually never met in person, have we?
We have not. Only in the DMs.
Only in the DMs, and often in the DMs of articles you've written that I've responded to, or that I've written that you've responded to. And the more that we've got to know each other, it's like our lives have been doing a similar thing in terms of our thought leadership, what we believe in, what we stand for. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Thanks for giving us some time. Now, you're currently in the middle of a 5-part series that you are writing around portfolio careers. And what I love about the conversation that you're having around this space is it's so aligned with a lot of the chat that I have around, I think, that we can create life and our businesses by design right now. I think the concept of work as we know it has evolved. I think the concept of how we work has evolved. And you wrote that you are currently designing work around time. Can you share a little bit more around what that means? What is this portfolio career of yours or business of yours that you're creating? What does it actually mean?
So I think for me, I have done the full-time thing. So I've been a full-time employee for the first sort of 10 years of my career. And then I left my corporate career to start a business, and I did the full-time founder thing for almost 5 years. And while I loved both of those phases of my life, about 18 months ago, I kind of had this pull to do something different. And there was something within me that just wanted variation and creativity, and I wanted to do lots of different things. And so I somehow, a little bit by design, but also a little bit organically, decided to leave my former business and start to generate a portfolio of different projects and clients and income streams and creative passions. And I just love it because my career is kind of a sum of lots of different parts. I'm not fully focused on one thing. And I think for me, it makes a lot of sense because I'm a generalist. So I have lots of different experience across lots of different facets of business with, corporates, in startups, small businesses. And I also have a lot of different creative passions. Like I love to write. I love to create, creative campaigns. I love to tinker away and create art. And so for me, instead of sort of trying to fit myself into one full-time structure, it just didn't really align with the life that I wanted to live. And I wanted that variation and interest. So I kind of went out and created this portfolio for myself.
I love that. There's so many things in that. So before we break down what it is that you're doing now, just for some context for our listeners, what were you doing before? What did Anna version prior 1.0 look like? What was Anna doing before for work?
So I had a business with my co-founder, Caitlin, called Lady Brains, and a little bit similar to you, we had a podcast where we interviewed female founders from around the world. We ran mentor programs, we ran events, did partnerships, ran some educational courses, and our entire sort of ethos was around supporting female founders in Australia. And that was a real passion for both of us. We were sort of building our entrepreneurial identities and building that business alongside supporting others in that space. And so I did that for 7 years. I did it for two years as a side hustle and then almost 5 years full-time. And prior to that, I was in corporate. So I worked at Mecca in sort of strategy and innovation in what was a dream job at the time. I absolutely loved it. And then prior to that, I was working for Uniqlo. I helped launch Uniqlo in Australia. So I've had kind of that corporate experience, the small business experience, and now kind of my own portfolio.
So you're almost like this queen of reinvention. You've gone from your corporate career to then building something successfully, and congratulations for that, over 7+ years. Those of us that are in our own businesses know that that's not easy. But then to make that decision to leave that, to essentially move into this space of curiosity of, I wonder what next could look like. What could it look like if I had the portfolio career? What was the tipping point for you to make that decision to change?
It was an interesting one. I think, we were building that business during COVID. And I think for a lot of people, at least for me, COVID was a time where I did a lot of reflection and sort of really did a lot of journaling and listened to kind of my intuition. And there was this sort of spark within me that was telling me to write. And that spark grew and grew and grew. And I just felt pulled. Honestly, it was almost like a spiritual thing. I felt called to kind of wrap up that chapter and move on to something else. And it's interesting. I always had variety as kind of my dream. Variety in my day-to-day is my dream. But after moving on from the business, I didn't really believe it was possible. Interestingly, I wanted that lifestyle and that work structure, but I was like, I just don't think that it's going to be both creatively fulfilling and financially stable. And so I actually sort of parked that dream and I was set on finding a full-time job. I was like, I want stability and security for a little bit. I don't want to be my own boss for a little bit. I just want to kind of take a step back, reassess, get a job, and then see what happens. And as I was going through the job search and actually interviewing, I was also having lots of conversations with founders of startups, and I managed to land a couple of really amazing consulting and contracting gigs. And there was a real tipping point because my dream job became available. I had this sort of ambition to get a chief of staff role in venture capital in Australia. And a chief of staff role at Blackbird came up at the time, which is one of Australia's top VC firms. And it happened in the same week that role came up, and then I landed these really amazing gigs. And I had to make a decision in that moment. Am I going to apply for this dream job and sort of go down that more stable path? Or am I going to commit to this idea of creating a body of work, a portfolio of work? And I listened to my intuition and I kind of followed that path and haven't really looked back since. And that was, it was a bit of a risk for me because I was really seeking financial stability and security. But I've, not listened to my gut in the past and it's come back to bite me. So I kind of listened to that feeling and I went for it.
So what does your portfolio career look like now? Can you share some of the things that you're doing now you talk about variety a lot. So what does Anna's job look like right now?
So I work still predominantly with startups across Australia and the US, and I contract for some startups. So that's kind of like working fractionally with teams. So they almost feel like a part-time job. But, it might be 2 days, it might be 3 days a week working within startups on specific projects. Then I also do kind of more traditional consulting on strategy, advisory as well. And then what I'm starting to kind of build up, which is what I really love, is the mentoring side, working with founders directly or operators within startups, or interestingly, people who kind of want to transition from a full-time job into this sort of portfolio career structure and want some guidance through that process. I'm starting to do that as well. So that's kind of all the paid work that I do. And then I have the creative passions and projects that I work on that earn me no money, but they fulfill a different kind of need. I'm not doing them for financial purposes. I'm doing them to kind of honor my own creativity and passions. And that's, largely my newsletter, the writing that I'm doing. And then I have a couple of little projects on the side, which I don't want to talk about yet, but have absolutely nothing to do with startups, nothing to do with consulting or anything like that, or portfolio careers. It's just kind of more artistic projects I'm working on as well.
Love that. So what do you feel you've gained by making that decision? You talked about the risk. And at the time, the risk was around that stability from a financial point of view, which I think many of us make decisions on. And right now, with this, economic challenge period that we're in, cost of living period that we're in, many people are having to make decisions, and often those decisions are made around financials. So that was obviously in your head at that time, that financial stability. And then you talked about trusting your intuition. You've now built this portfolio career. What do you feel on reflection that you've gained by changing your approach to work?
So I think the biggest thing for me was having a real sense of autonomy and freedom over my time. And I think as a former founder, to a degree, I had that autonomy and freedom over my time, but we were so dedicated to building that business and putting everything into it, time, money, effort, energy, and really sacrificing a lot to make that work. I had freedom, but I didn't. And whether that was, the business's fault or self-imposed, who knows? But, I felt like I really poured everything that I could into that business. And, that's a really noble thing. And a lot of people love that. and it was amazing for a certain period of time in my life. But I wanted a work structure that didn't require so much of me in terms of sacrifice, that still gave me that freedom to kind of own my time and experiment with my schedule and become really clear on when I work best and how I want to design my time and how I want to design the tasks that I'm doing, and having that kind of freedom and autonomy over really my whole life has been the biggest upside for sure.
Do you think, from what you're observing in startup land, amongst your friends and colleagues, reflecting on, how the world of life and business is evolving, particularly with Gen Z and millennials taking center stage at work, do you feel that this is potentially a trend that we're going to see more of people, as opposed to, going into a job and being paid a 9 to 5 and that structure, but actually doing what you've done and actually what I've done of going, you know what, I want autonomy and independence around my life. What's your sense of what you're noticing out there?
1,000,000%. Even, it's just incredible the response that I've had to my newsletter in terms of people reaching out and saying, oh my God, this is exactly what I want to do. I've always been really entrepreneurial, but I've never wanted to take the leap into building a full-time business. But I want that autonomy and freedom over my time. I had 2 conversations with friends on the weekend who both are going to pitch part-time work to their employer so that they can spend 2 to 3 days a week on building their own thing on the side, whether that be, a pottery business or whether it's a coaching business or whatever it might be. And, these are really, these are people who have spent their entire career working up the corporate ladder and are in really, really senior positions and have sort of arrived at the destination in a way and realized, actually, you know what? I think there's a different way. I'm seeing it absolutely everywhere. Are you seeing the same thing?
Oh, totally. And as you're talking, I'm reflecting on, so I've been running my own, in your terms, portfolio career now for around 13 years. And I can remember, I'd say probably about 3 years before that, I essentially was doing what is seen as norm now of having a bit of a side hustle going on, of exploring something else. And can't believe I'm admitting this publicly on the podcast, but I remember my boss at the time disciplining me for actually having a side hustle. It wasn't allowed. It literally wasn't allowed. So that would be 16 years ago, maybe? No, I'm showing my age. But for me, on reflection, listening to you, I'm going, how awesome is it that both individuals are exploring the impact that they want to make with their work, and thank goodness employers are starting to be open to it. Maybe they've got no choice, right? Maybe they've got no choice because it's so hard to find staff right now that they've had to evolve. But when you look at where the world is going and the challenges that we're all facing, the reality is we all need to start thinking differently and being curious about how we live, how we lead, how we earn money, what work actually potentially could look like in the future. And I think COVID was a bit of a wake-up call for many people who, on reflection, started rethinking, how much is enough? What is it that I want to do, and all those sorts of things. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves. I'm curious, Anna, when you're talking to people who are equally curious about doing work differently, what sort of advice would you give people who might even be listening now and going, that's exactly what I want to do? What advice would you give them in terms of taking that leap? Because the risk is real, right? The risk from a financial thing is real or not. But it's a big change. And people around you, did people around you question why you were doing what you were doing?
Well, not really, because I'd been sort of self-employed for 5 years under Lady Brain. So it felt like quite a natural evolution. But one thing that I did do, which was really, really helpful as I sort of started to get out there and network really and try and solicit work, was I crunched the numbers and I looked at kind of my spending. This is really practical advice, but I think it would be useful. I looked at my monthly spending and I calculated 2 numbers. I calculated my survive number, which was, how much do I need to pay for rent? What are my groceries? What are my bills? What was that number that I absolutely had to earn or bring home, rather, each month to be able to survive? And then what was my goal? What was my Thrive number that would allow me to kind of live the lifestyle that I want, save, invest, do all the things that I wanted to do? And I calculated both of those numbers. And then I calculated how much income my sole trader business would need to bring in, taking into consideration tax and super and all that sort of stuff. So I had those two numbers, and I made it my one goal to get a retainer that would cover ideally the Thrive number, but at a minimum the Survive number. And that was my primary intention. I wasn't really interested in the beginning with securing project work. I wanted, financial stability and security was still really important to me alongside freedom. And so that was what I went after. And I was very lucky that I kind of managed to land 3 retainer clients that covered that Thrive number in the first 3 months. And that sort of gave me the confidence that I could do it. I could really set a goal around earning and meet that goal, and B, that I could kind of make this career path work. So that was a really helpful process for me, and something that I'd probably advise everyone do, because the financial part is real. You have to live, and even if you have a buffer of savings, without a plan that can dwindle away very quickly. So that's probably where I would start if people are looking to kind of transition into this new kind of career.
Yeah, I love that, because, I often talk about everyone can have a dream, but unless we actually take action, that dream won't actually eventuate. But that added piece of that, you've got to get a plan to get there. And so the plan is one thing, and many people leave without that plan, or they start doing this without actually doing those numbers. And the numbers, as you said, we have to survive. The numbers are different for everybody, but actually have some clarity around what it means to survive and your term thrive. What else did you do though so you had the plan, what did you do next? How did you get that work?
So I think for me, what I've learned over the last 12 to 18 months and what worked really well for me was to focus on the habits that were going to set me up for success. I obviously had the financial goal, but beyond that, I didn't really have any concrete goal about what I wanted to do in terms of the split of work, the types of businesses, etc. But I knew that I had to cultivate really, really good sales habits and really good writing habits for me. And so there were a couple of things that I committed to doing in that first 3 months, which ultimately led to me landing that first work. The first was a writing habit of writing 30 minutes every single day. So I didn't in the beginning have any goal to post every day or show up online every day, but I knew that I wanted to write. I was good at it. And ultimately, once I did consistently write online, I knew that would generate opportunities. And so I wrote for 30 minutes every day, just 30 minutes with no outcome in mind. And the second thing that I did was I reached out to a new person every single day. And, I was quite lucky actually in that I had a pretty strong network from my time at Lady Brains interviewing founders, and also actually from my time at Mecca, because a lot of the people I worked with at Mecca have gone on to do incredible things, build businesses, etc. And so I had a relatively deep existing network, but I also was quite strategic with the new people that I would reach out to. So I knew that I wanted to work with startups. I knew that the startups that would be best placed to hire contractors or consultants like me were funded startups. So I, created a hit list of funded startups in Australia, businesses that I thought were really interesting and that I could add value to. And then I made it a habit to reach out to one new person every single day at least. And honestly, they are the two things that I did, and everything snowballed off the back of that.
Yeah. So again, it's you took ownership. You first of all made that choice that this is what you were going to do. What I then heard is you put the head around it in terms of the plan and the finances, the numbers. But then what you added to that, and this is the difference, is you took action. So 2 very simple habits. One, that creative habit of writing, which now we're starting to see in terms of your posting online, which is building the positioning. And that's how, we continue to connect. But that second piece around reaching out to your existing network, and actually, instead of waiting it to come to you, every day you were doing something that was creating this opportunity, and hats off to you. It's awesome. I love the fact that as a result of that activity, you've now both created this portfolio career or business, and also the time to do these secret projects, which we will get to hear about moving forward. The flip side of that then, because I'm sure it's not all been roses and unicorns, because it's very different starting something. What would you What have you learned about yourself over these last 18 months?
One of the things I've learned about myself and the shifts that I'm trying to make at the moment is I'm someone who has historically been very easily addicted to work. I'm very structured in the way that I approach things. I'm very systematic in terms of my thinking. I always try to optimize for output. And I think that's been helpful to get me to this point. But I think I overplay that. And I think that's become pretty clear to me over the last sort of 12 months. And so what I'm trying to do now is shift my focus away from being productive all the time to being prolific. And it's a little bit of a subtle shift in thinking and mindset and attitude. But to me, prolific is more about optimizing for creativity and meaning and joy rather than purely for output. And so I mean, you hear this all the time, but for me, it really means working less and going for walks and allowing myself to be more creative and ideate rather than trying to take on as many clients as possible and spend as many hours as possible to drive as much output as possible. And so it's a constant work in progress. It's really about deprogramming the way that my brain has been operating for the past 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, and I see that I'm seeing that all the time with the clients that I work with, that we have all been programmed into a way of working, or alternatively in our own businesses, what success looks like. You know, when we reflect on, I'm just thinking about some of our clients and their recent successes financially, they are smashing it in their businesses, whether they're are solopreneurs or they've got teams, smashing their financial year results. And yet when you delve deeper into the conversation and into, you know, how they've got there, that piece that you've just touched on around the space to think, the space to find joy, the space to do nothing. I had one client literally last week in conversation, like almost jumping from the rafters about how amazing her business had been. And then in the next breath, I need some space. And I said, what do you need space to do? To read. And so I think this is part of that reshaping of work that you're essentially a living and breathing example of. And it's what I've been doing of how do you reshape it? But your point is we've got to reprogram ourselves. And that's really hard. It's really hard to do because the world is still quite traditional.
It's so difficult to do. And it's funny because about a year ago, I was, relatively fresh into this, and I found myself in a position where I'd secured 6 to 7 days worth of work per week. And so I was working 6 to 7 days per week because I was taking on clients and taking on great projects. And I was kind of like, Anna, you're in this unique position where you have the ability to set boundaries and say no to things or design my time and how I work and what I do. And yet I wasn't taking advantage of that privilege. And so, I'm much better now. I'm not contracted out or consulting 7 days a week, but it's still a process. And I think, that's the other thing that I love about portfolio careers and the way that I think about it is it's fluid. And so there are times where earning has been the primary need or motivator for me. And there are times where creativity has been the primary motivator for me. And I've been able to kind of adjust my clients and my workload accordingly, depending on what I want to focus on. And for me, that flexibility actually is probably one of the things that is most amazing about this type of work structure. It's fluid, it can change, it can evolve. Maybe one day I'll go back to a full-time job, or maybe one day I'll do the full-time founder thing again. But for now, I like having that ability to ebb and flow.
I love it. Is there anything that scares you with this career?
I mean, I think, part of the reality is that there's uncertainty always, even though I'm in a great position at the moment. All my work could dry up tomorrow. That's just the nature of working for yourself, which you obviously would know. So there's a degree of uncertainty and fear around that uncertainty. But I think the thing that I take solace in is that I've proven to myself that I can do it. And so I trust that I can do it again. And I think that's only come from being kind of in the game for the past 5 or 6 years, being self-employed. It could all go to shit, to be honest, but I do trust in my ability to kind of be able to pick up the pieces if it does. So there's definitely some fear, but not enough to stop me from keeping on moving forward. Yeah.
And when you say not enough, why not enough? What have you created that's so awesome for yourself that, I mean, people who know me well know I'll often say I'm totally unemployable. I'm totally unemployable now. I don't know why. I'm curious as to what it means for you. You know, when you talk about I could go back to full-time work, what at the moment is stopping you from even considering that, despite the fact that it could all dry out tomorrow? What are you gaining from what you're doing?
I mean, I say I could go back to being a full-time employee, but really I don't think I could. I don't think I could do it. But I always know that's an option if I needed to.
The backup plan.
Yeah, it's a backup plan. I mean, I think I just gained the creative freedom and just the freedom to be able to pick and choose what I work on, who I work with. You know, also I think the other important thing that's playing in the back of my mind is I'm in my mid-30s, potentially thinking about trying to have a family and wanting the ability to continue being able to earn on my own terms after I have a kid if we're able to have one. So I think it's that flexibility and just that autonomy to be able to design my life and my time depending on what I need and value in that moment.
Do you have, because I know many of our listeners will be listening to this, how do you manage your boundaries? Do you have specific boundaries? You touched on earlier that at one stage you'd taken on work that was essentially 6 to 7 days a week. And I'm imagining like your prior business, like you said, we go into it with the expectation of freedom, but the risk is we're working harder than ever before. What have you taken into your work now? Or what are you working on? Because we know we're always a work in progress in terms of managing those boundaries to keep the benefits of the portfolio career happening.
Yes, that's a great question. It's something that I've historically been terrible at, maintaining boundaries, especially with my time. I mean, it's a constant challenge. I think one of the things that's been really successful for me is having a very clear rule that I don't take meetings on Mondays. I just don't. And for me, that allows me to kind of do creative work and deep work at the beginning of the week, because ultimately, you know, it's so easy to kind of be distracted and spiral, you know, into being reactive, I guess. And so that's probably the one big boundary that I've set that's been really successful. It's a little bit difficult for me because the main clients I work with are based in the US. And so ideally, I'd love to have boundaries around not taking meetings in the morning, but it's just unfortunately with time zones, it's just not possible. And so that's one constraint I've kind of had to work around. Yeah, to be honest, it's quite difficult. I find it hard to say no to people. And one of the things that I'm really trying to be more intentional with in terms of boundaries is, you know, how I spend my time sort of having just meetings with people or conversations with people without an agenda. You know, I've done a lot of virtual coffee catch-ups and just meet and greets over the years. And a lot of that's been really amazing in terms of building the network and generating opportunities. But I'm kind of at a time where I feel the pendulum's about sort of starting to swing in the opposite direction and I need to be more discerning. And I find it really difficult to say no to people. So yeah, it's tough.
You have to keep those boundaries in place because everyone will want a piece of you. Anna, it's been fabulous to chat with you. I'd love to hear what anyone that's listening here that is curious, they may be in a full-time job right now, they may be running their own business. Anyone that's listening that is going, this sounds like exactly what I want to be doing for this next phase of my life. What's your final words that you would say to anyone that's listening that is curious about this portfolio career approach?
I think the main message I'd want to leave people, which is the message that I probably needed to hear 12 to 18 months ago, is it is possible. It really is possible to have a work structure that both offers financial security and creative fulfillment, and that sort of plays into a lifestyle that you want to create. It is possible, even though it seems unreachable. And so I think that sort of motivational kind of message is the most important thing, because often, you know, if we don't believe it's possible, we won't take the action to try and make it. So it's possible. There are so many people out there doing it, including yourself. And so I always found looking at those people really inspirational. It encouraged me to kind of take the first steps.
And I think that's the key, the first steps. If I look back on, I've been running my own portfolio career now for 13 years, and I look at where I was 12 years ago versus where I'm at now, totally different. I couldn't have even planned it, but it's that willingness to constantly move and reshape and experiment. And I've certainly learned over the last 13 years, I am very clear on the people I want to hang out with and do work with that bring me joy. You know, one of my value systems is they've got to add to my energy, not deplete me from energy. And I've got these, you know, in terms of boundaries, I've got some very clear things that are non-negotiables, that are my checking mechanism as to whether I say yes or no, which has been really gained really over the last 13 years, because otherwise I might as well be working. I might as well be in a job. So it's been awesome. I'm so excited to follow this next season of your career. I love the fact that you are out there sharing this as an option. And I'll definitely be putting in the show notes where people can follow you and learn from you. I have no doubt that there's going to be some amazing wins and new opportunities that will come. And thank you, Anna, for sharing where you're at now and being so open and honest about what's been great about it, and also some of the things that you're still navigating as you build this next stage in your career. It's been awesome to chat and awesome to finally see you in person, albeit still online.
We'll meet in person one day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks.